Welcome to the Treehouse Principle podcast. This is the very first episode, and I'm so excited to be in this new space. Beautiful, beautiful new studio here, Lone Oak Cinema. And today I have my first guest with me, who's actually the co-owner of the studio. And her name is Ruth, and she's going to help me sort of walk through some of the concepts from the Treehouse Principle book and the framework around what I am offering through this particular business and book. So thank you, Ruth, so much for joining me.
It is my absolute pleasure. It's been such a joy getting to know you over the last couple of weeks here. And we did a lot of chatting beforehand.
Yes.
And I think we realized, oh my God, there's millions of conversations we could have.
Yes.
So, but I thought a great place to start is why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and why did you write this book?
Right. Yes. So a backstory for those who are just new to the podcast, that are new to me. I am a 2-time cancer journeyer. And when I went through those particular journeys, I didn't really know how to process a lot of that. I think, and really what I would say is a lot of people that go into any sort of crisis, whether it's health related or grief or identity loss, there is this this sort of survival mechanism that we go into. So it's flight or fight. And that's exactly what happened to me. And coming from sort of a Gen X background as well, we were not really taught how to process emotion and process trauma. And I always used to say this is the very first book that I wrote about the cancer journeys, that we would sweep things under the proverbial swag 70s shag carpet. So it was just sort of that understanding that something was deeper rooted in my whole, kind of coming back to who I was and also coming back to a new version of me. So then I decided to write my second book called The Treehouse Principle, but it was more about understanding that tapping back into imagination and wonder and play to activate that creative being within all of us after crisis. So when we get into a crisis situation, as I said, we go into survival. And so it's often very difficult to figure out how to get out of that crisis loop, as I call it. And so I think that that's what began this journey of discovering what does it mean to tap into our imagination in that creative sense and powerful sense as adults. Like, it's so easy for us as kids, but as an adult, it's a lot more challenging. So
no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, there's probably 3 or 4 things that I would love to dive into there. There's a lot to unpack. Congratulations. I heard that you are 10 years now.
Yes, 10 years
Tell
beyond
us
the second journey. Yes.
of cancer.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really huge.
Yes.
Really neat too that this book documents kind of the healing other side. Is that right?
Yes, it was definitely so. I only speak a little bit about the cancer journeys in this book. This book became more about discovering the neuroscience behind what happens to our brains when we go through trauma, but then also how we are able to rewire our neural pathways for more of that forward momentum. So I talk a lot about moving from fear to forward, and it's and how crisis cracks us open. And so that how can we look at that as being, as crisis being the catalyst for change? And a lot of people come to this place where they're sort of standing on the edge of this, this mountainside, if you will, after they've been through some, any form of trauma, really, and they don't know what's next. But what I like to say, and specifically in this book, my tagline is, but you get to create what comes next. And let me help you figure out what that is.
I can imagine if you're going through, okay, first of all, crisis could look like many different things.
Yeah.
Obviously, going through cancer, terrifying for you, your family. What are some of the other areas that you're seeing crisis in other people that you're kind of seeing the same, fight or flight reaction?
Definitely. So to get a lot more personal, we actually went through our own family crisis as well. So 3 years ago, we lost my husband's older brother tragically in a motorcycle accident,
Mm.
and it was just devastating. We had all had this beautiful family vacation that week down in the area that I'm from, so right on the lake, very, very healing type space, and just all around a wonderful time. So, although I'm grateful that we did have that time, it was such a shock to the entire family. And that was something that I had not navigated personally myself. I've lost family members and pets, but uh, not necessarily in that traumatic sense. So I didn't quite understand how to navigate that in terms of the grief that I might have been feeling
Mm.
and how to process that just from the relationship I had with my brother-in-law, but more so as a caregiver. And I didn't fully understand to the level of the layers that grief can surface, and even a few years later. So I watched and I observed my husband navigate this journey, and also our family members around that. And that's honestly what I truly believe did prompt the concept of the Treehouse Principle, was the understanding that we can find our way either back to kind of our true selves, but
Mm.
then I think it's the creating of a new version of ourselves. It's really truly discovering um, who we want to be beyond this crisis
Mhm.
that tore us open. And so I think that honestly has a lot to play in the narratives in the book.
Yeah. And I have chronic illness and spent a season where I was, stuck in bed for 9 months while they figured out what it was, and many, many years of not being able to do anything that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And the grief of that, the crisis that you're talking about,
Yeah.
it's interesting because the healing can't come until you get out of that fight or flight. So I want to talk about that in a second. But you also mentioned in your book, and as we were chatting, that crisis cracks you open,
Mhm.
and then you can feel like you don't know who you are anymore,
Yeah.
but you get to choose who
Mhm.
you become. So talk us through that process,
Yeah.
because I can imagine lots of people are listening who are either in that state right now where they, are in the crisis and they're just feeling the pressure and the weight of it, or they're starting to be like, I want to get out of it, but I actually don't know how, and I don't even know who I am.
Yes. Yeah. So, and again, I can speak to this on the levels of the identity shifts beyond, going through surgeries and going through chronic illness, because it does change you. It changes your
Yeah.
identity. It changes how you show up
Yeah.
for not only, your family, your friends, but for yourself. And so I remember, being in this position when I had just finished recovering from my first surgery, and standing in front of the mirror. And that was the first time I revealed to myself what my new normal was going to look like in
Mm.
terms of my breasts. Now, as a woman, and a lot of women feel this way, there's an identity, the femininity that comes with
Mhm.
our identity, right? And our breasts. And so it took a lot of narrative reframing for me to move beyond seeing myself as like what I called myself, the Franken breast beast, um, and trying to not only unpack what I was experiencing, but truly start to move through it, and reframe those narratives. So especially when we're going through any sort of health crisis, I think we're right in the thick of it, and we don't really know how we're going to get out of it. And sometimes we don't even know if we're going to become a different, like if we're going to be able to even return to who we were
Mhm.
before. And 9 times out of 10, we don't. But then it's the why, start to get curious, and you say, but who do I want to be then now? Who do I get to be? So there is a grief with processing who you were before that particular crisis, for sure. But then, as I've also said, is gratitude and grief can coexist.
Mm.
So it's acknowledging the grief, but then also you are allowed to be grateful. You're allowed to have joy. And maybe that's just little sparks of joy that come in. And maybe it's like, as I've said before as well in the book, I call it our nervous system safe mode. I speak to it more of a technical perspective. And it's how what happens is I truly believe this is that our system shut down into a safe mode. So only the essential functions like breathing and maybe even communicating are online. But the
Mm.
other functions like joy and play and wonder and imagination, those things are shut down for a time
Mhm.
in order for your system to start to heal.
Right. So it is a healthy mechanism in the grieving process in a way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when people are getting to the point where they're thinking, okay, I'm ready to kind of get to the other side of this as well, or to start thinking that maybe there is another side of this.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the treehouse principle. Where did that come from?
Right. So I just love how it came about. Actually, I was on a walk, and that is one of the things that I had started to plug into was how healing it was for me to get into the woods. And when I was younger, I remember always wanting a treehouse. And spoiler alert, didn't get my treehouse, and that's okay. It's okay, Mom. It's all right. It's okay, Dad. However, I remember thinking back, I imagined all of the details of that treehouse.
Mm.
And it felt like a safe space. It felt like somewhere that I could go to create and imagine and play. So even back then at that, in the 10-year-old little brain, I was creating intentionally from my imagination. So then when I started to tap into the teachings of like Neville Goddard and Esther Hicks and Gabrielle Bernstein and all of these other thought leaders, spiritual thought leaders, I thought there's something here. There's something very powerful. And I needed to do a lot more understanding and research about the science behind, because I love the science behind the woo woo.
Me
And
too.
yeah, and so it so made sense to me when I started to unpack what did it truly mean to, and like how does our brain function when we're actually moving through an imagination or a meditation phase. And I just thought it was so powerful. So the treehouse principle came about when I was on one of these walks in the middle of winter last January. And I thought, well, that it seems a little trivial, a little bit childish maybe, but I just kept thinking, nope, you can work with this. This is how we bring people back online. So it's no longer meeting you in the crisis.
Mhm.
It's sort of elevating you beyond the crisis and helping you to see what you have the capability of creating next. And so maybe you were a musician and you set that aside. Maybe you were a mechanic. So it doesn't have to be artistic, it
Mhm.
can be as simple as you really genuinely enjoyed working on cars or something like that, and those pieces of yourself fell away. And so it's tapping back into those pieces, I think, again, that do create that healing space.
Yeah, I love that. Tell us a little bit about like pivot versus punish.
Yes, so that concept came about for myself actually. And again, as I always joke, I need to take more pages from my own book.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I, yes, we've talked about is that we go through the grief when we go through anything that disrupts our normal activities. We're used to being able to get out daily for walks, say. We're used to being able to work out. We're used to various things that we enjoy doing physically. And then anything that I think that can bring it doesn't even have to be a health crisis. I did actually see this and observe this with my husband. Um, he would end up having these body tremors and tics that were causing him discomfort and pain. And so when he was trying to do some workouts and exercise to help him, because he knew it was good for his brain, and good for his body, he couldn't understand why he was exhausted all the time.
Mm.
So I said, well, because your system is still trying to come back online. So let's let's unpack that. So instead of punishing yourself and saying, oh, why are you not back there yet? Or why are you not there yet? We can pivot and we can say, okay, today was a great day and I was able to do this and this and this. Tomorrow, maybe I'm not going to be able to have as much energy to do the things that I normally love to do. And that's okay. And how do we acknowledge that, grieve it, and then give ourselves permission to rest?
Hmm.
Yeah.
That could be a whole topic.
Yeah.
I mean, our culture is so anti-rest.
Yep.
And I think especially our generation
Oh,
as well. I
yes.
mean, I'm like right
Yes.
on the cusp between
Yes.
millennial and Gen
Yep.
X, but
Yeah.
it was absolutely pounded into me growing up that, if you rest, you're lazy. Like get out
Yes.
of bed, you can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
All
Yes.
of those types of
Yes.
sayings. So, but what you're saying is that rest, it's okay to give yourself permission to rest.
Mm-hmm.
How would you coach somebody through that who's battling that in their brains where they're like, I know I need to rest because I physically can't keep going,
Yeah.
but I've also pushed myself to the brink multiple times
Yeah.
because I feel like it's not safe to rest.
Yes. Yes. That's a big one. And a big part of it is conditioning. This is where I do talk about my framework a lot. I've got a reveal, release, redefine framework. Let's reveal the narratives that are coming up.
Hmm.
Are they ultimately true?
Hmm.
Are they programmed into us from years and years and years and society and just generational? Yes. 9 times out of 10, yes, they are. And we've been following that same program. So it's about being able to bring those narratives to the surface, look at them, observe them. So I talk about the observer effect as well,
Mm-hmm.
where we can observe our thoughts from a non judgmental space and then be able to kindly release them if we need to, and then redefine them. So, what are those narratives going to look like going forward for myself? Maybe today I need to recognize that rest is not only important, but it's essential for me to function going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so today, if I have to, I will pencil or pen in my rest time.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't be a luxury. It shouldn't be something that we just that we do on a whim. I think we need to be a lot more intentional about when we take times of rest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through an example of doing that 3-step process?
Yeah.
Let's take rest as an example. Let's say I am somebody who, I joke, I'm definitely a type B person,
Mhm.
but I also I don't really know how to just sit around and do nothing super well.
Yeah.
I'm always even planning and thinking and,
Right.
So
Yeah.
walk us through an example of how you might help somebody with those 3 principles.
Yes. So then within the reveal phase, I would say, okay, some of the narratives that might come up, and I'll use myself as an example,
Mm-hmm.
would be, all right, Jenn, you have all of these things that you need to you're going to need to accomplish this week. How are you going to get that done? You got to get that done. And then I would call it like the little negative Nellies that come up, the little narratives that say, and again, let me point out, that's our brain just simply doing its job. We're wired for safety first. We're wired for predictability, which is also safety. So our brain is going to say, what are you doing? Wait a minute, you got to get all this stuff done. And you said you were going to do this. So what are you doing? Resting. What are you doing? Procrastinating. And so then I would say that's your reveal. That's your reveal phase. Then the release phase comes in where, yes, of course.
Okay. The reveal phase. So real quick, how does somebody recognize that though in the moment?
Yeah. So I think what to recognize it in the moment takes a little bit of practice because a lot of us, as I said earlier, we're conditioned to just think this is normal. to think those narratives are normal, to think our brain, it's just, we punish ourselves on a regular basis and we think it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that now more and more people are waking up and they're becoming much more aware of what no longer serves us. And they are starting to push back. But again, yes, it's about needing to educate ourselves. So what I would say at the same point, I think we all have this intuition where something doesn't feel right. So that's when we get to tap into that intuition a little bit more and educate ourselves on our own intuition to say, there's something here. Now let's dig a little deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be exhausting as well. And that maybe you're only ever able to, in that first day, acknowledge that something's not quite right. And that's okay. So then you set it aside until the next day. It's just something that I think we don't give ourselves enough time for or credit. And again, I was actually more of a type A personality before any of this came into my world in the last decade and a bit. So it really sat me on my butt. So it was something that when I started to do my own research and started to really truly tap into my own inner work and healing. And yes, I saw therapists as well. I never want to take away from the importance of seeing specific therapists. However, for my particular situation in cancer, I could not find anybody that actually had been through cancer or were going through it. So they couldn't meet me fully where I was at. So I think there's another aspect or another layer of that where you really do find the research, or you do the research, I would say, for yourself to find those individuals that are speaking to you directly and are able to, help meet you where you're at. But yes, again, as I said, the reveal phase can be a very painful also phase, so exhausting. Because you're now rehashing things that they've laid dormant for years as well. So it takes a lot of energy to look at that and to observe those thoughts, and then to observe them as well without judgment. Sometimes we need to be a little bit more assertive about our own time and set boundaries for ourselves in those situations.
Yeah. Okay, so we've just revealed this thought is there. Maybe we read your book and we're like, oh, Jenn says that thought isn't normal. Jenn's out.
Yeah.
That's me punishing myself. Okay.
I did it again.
Exactly. Yeah. So, or maybe your therapist was like, actually, that's not a very kind thought or something like that. Somebody has helped you see that has helped you reveal this thought to yourself where you had that gut check.
Yes.
Now what do we do?
Yes. So then when we are able to acknowledge that and we're able to kind of sit with it, process it, move through it. Where did that come from? Maybe that's something that I was born with, we're born with those thoughts. We observe our environment, that's also another piece of it, right? And I don't get into like child regression or generational trauma or anything like that. But at the same point, there is something to be said about the things that we observe when we're growing up. So the way that, our parents maybe, and I've actually addressed this as well in terms of how maybe our parents or our grandparents were behaved around money. And so there is this whole layer of trauma that can come through around money even, which again is tied to safety and survival for us. So so that piece of it, I think, is extremely important to be able to sit with that. But then when you come to that release phase or that middle, I also call it kind of the messy middle, because this is where we're really starting to unpack, and it gets a little messy because we're unpacking things that have maybe laid dormant for years. And then we're recognizing that we no longer want to stay the same. Okay, now we're ready to invite that new normal in or that new identity in. But what does that look like? And who does that person look like? And I don't like that she no longer feels like doing this. And how come this person doesn't really care for me anymore? So there is another layer of grief that can come with that process. And so when you're releasing those narratives, again, you want to take time to recognize that This was the old identity. These are the limiting beliefs that I grew up with, or I was conditioned just by whatever,
Mm-hmm.
environment, society, what have you, observing other things. And that no longer serves the type of person that I want to become.
Love that. That no longer
Yeah.
serves the type of person I want to become.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, exactly. And then comes the fun part.
Yay.
Because you've gone through the yuckies, you've gone through all the ick. It's not fun, and it's not for the faint of heart. But if you're willing to, it's like, I use this visual a lot where think about a pond, and there's always like this little bit, a layer of like algae or gunk on top of the pond. But if you're able to skim that layer off, then it reveals all of the ecosystem inside that pond. And you have this visual of, I didn't know that there was like a goldfish in there. Somebody dropped off like 10 years ago. Anyway, and so then the redefine piece, though, is that beautiful place where you get to say, I've always wanted to try this. I've always thought of becoming this. Maybe I can try this. Maybe I can look into this. And then you start to kind of, I would say almost a different reveal. It's sort of like you start to reveal the other layers of yourself that maybe laid dormant as well before. And you became kind of the people pleaser, recovering people pleaser. Ooh, a lot of us do that. And we start to say no a lot more. We set our boundaries. We take up more space. We speak our truths. And not everybody likes that. Not everybody likes that. And it's a difficult time to also recognize, but when you start to say, but I'm no longer willing to go back to who I was. Because that's when you start to get curious about why would I have gone through something like this to just stay the same?
Well, and to your point as well earlier and in your book is that you almost can't.
Yeah, it's true.
Because it's not you anymore. Like that person doesn't exist anymore in some capacity as well.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting too.
Yeah, it is. And it's so true. Yeah.
What do you think about in this creation process, creating what comes next? Either your Treehouse Principle. Tell us a little bit about what that might look like, the fun stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it had to do with, I wanted to help us, like, collectively and even myself, tap back into play. And so, one of the things that I've been muddling about right now too is this project on YouTube about choose your own adventure. So there was these books back in the day where we got to choose your own adventure, and we got to choose the paths that we would take based on whatever page we decided to turn to. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to get us back to, is where we're actually deciding what path we want to take. Maybe that path leads to a dead end or a big dragon or something. But how much fun was it to try and discover what that looked like or what that could be? And so, and then, the other aspect is really truly tapping into our imagination to the level that we had the ability to tap into as kids. And it was just natural.
Effortless.
Right? Effortless. Yes. We didn't schedule it. We didn't like have to ask permission to use our imaginations. And I feel like we've lost that. And I feel like imagination is what brings something into the creative 3D physical realm, if you will. It starts first in the imagination, and then it becomes physical. It's a process, but yes, it literally starts everything. Like the studio was a thought, was something that was perceived. And then it became into this physical form because you took the steps to make it happen. But that's the piece that I think maybe we take for granted, or we just sort of overlook, because it just seems like a normal process. But when we truly peel back the layers and we realize how truly powerful we are as creative beings, that's when the magic starts to happen.
So what would you suggest people do if they have these grand ideas or, they're beginning to imagine, they're beginning to get excited about things? What should they do next?
I'd say start writing it down. Ask ChatGPT. Leverage the tools you have available to you right now to figure out if it is something that you really are interested in checking out a little bit more about. I think there are so many people that they sit and they wait and they have all these thoughts and all these ideas, but it never seems to be what they think is the right time. But there is no right time because the present moment's all we truly ever have.
Mm.
And so you have that present moment to decide. And if it only starts with a decision, that's enough for that day. And I think that really is what sparks the initial thought, the initial, piece before then you start taking the steps towards that happening.
Yeah, I love that. And I can imagine that having gone through cancer twice and then with the super sad loss of your brother-in-law, it makes you very aware that you really have today and we're not guaranteed anything else.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like
Definitely.
go for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Do the thing.
Exactly. Do the damn thing.
Do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How has your life changed from even 5 years ago
Yeah.
through these processes,
I think for myself, I've definitely taken a lot more time out for me. I set more boundaries. I now pick up, and people maybe don't care for this, and that's fine. I don't really care. I'm coming into my era of I'll be turning 50 in August, so I'm very much in this. You know what? I don't care what you think about that because this is my protective energy. This is my protective space. And in order for me to create these things for you, I need to set my boundaries. And then I need to be available to you to help guide you through. So that's some of the things that I need to do maybe is say no more often. And I would say that's one of the big things that has changed. I think I've become more of a teacher, and I didn't realize I was a teacher. And that's something that has really started to evolve. And I would say maybe more so in the last few months. So
exciting.
That's really exciting. And so things like this podcast now starting to bring it into form, as nerve-wracking as it can be, it's also recognizing that this is how we show up. And I think I've talked to you about this as well before, there's vulnerability in the visibility piece. But if you don't become visible, then nothing changes. And that's one of my coaches says, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so it's like, are you ready to change? Are you ready to welcome new ideas? And move forward. And I'd say yes. Now it's like I say yes a lot more as well.
I was just going to ask you, what do you say? So you said I say no a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's like bravo, because that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
What are you saying yes to?
I'm saying yes more to opportunities like this. When I saw this advertised, this studio space, I thought, I don't know where the revenue's coming yet. But there was this intuitive nudge to say yes. And I'm following that yes. It's the inner knowing, I think, too, right? It's intuitively. So yes, the saying no, I think, comes with boundaries. The things that you no longer settle for or, participate in or, tolerate, if you will. But the saying yes has everything to do with the intuitive hits that come through when something seems to just feel right and there's an opportunity there and you don't know what that's going to look like, but you're intrigued to find out.
And it is vulnerable to follow that still.
It is, definitely.
Right. But I think it's interesting that you said this whole process is not for the faint of heart. You have to be so brave to do this whole process.
Yeah.
Do you think that through this process, you've kind of been working out those like brave muscles.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's been happening a lot. Yes, and I actually spoke to my husband about this recently too, because we'll talk a lot about how we try the new things or even just things that we've done before. One of the things that the big narratives for us we're both motorcycle riders as well. So our big narrative was, do we get rid of the motorcycles?
Mm-hmm.
That was a tough one. We had to move through that. And then one of the things that we came to the agreement of was we will not make any fear-based decisions or emotion-based decisions. What do we really enjoy the most about motorcycling? Well, it's the freedom. And then finding out, in fact, for my sister-in-law, and this is getting very real and vulnerable and raw, that my brother-in-law found great joy and it helped relieve his anxiety when he would go out for his rides. So it made sense. It really helped us show up in that narrative as opposed to the fear and as opposed to the what ifs. And I want to talk about the what ifs. But our brain is wired, again, for safety, as I say. So our brain will say, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? No. Right. And so we have the ability, though, to rewire that survival state and say, no, you just did the thing and it was okay. You were safe. You were okay. And you had fun. And what did we learn from this? So things like, me showing up now on this podcast in a visible way, it was new. It was scary, took some guts, right? But I knew that my brain then would go, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. I think you got it. I'll let you have this one. I'll let you have this one. But yes, that is what it is.
And you're definitely going to need that again when you edit this and when you go to press publish and when you get your first comments.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. It's like, but it's interesting. I was just having this visual of you like exercising those brave muscles.
Yeah.
And then, so then they become the instinct, right? Or you were talking about rewiring your brain.
Yeah.
And so talk about the what ifs. What do you want to say about that?
Yes. So the what ifs are a lot. Again, it's all about the survival state. But the what ifs are great as long as we remain curious. It's when we allow them to take over and they become louder than our forward momentum. That's when we have to start really observing what's going on and what's behind this or what's underneath this. So the what ifs can come up and say, but what if you fail? But what if people don't like this? But what if you look nervous? What if blah, 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 right? Just anything. And that's where I'd say, so do it anyway. Do it scared. Do it with the what ifs. And then reframe it or redefine it to say, imagine when. Imagine when this takes off. Imagine when people start to find you and show up. Because you have something that they want and that you can help them move forward from fear. So that's the best part about it, is that reframing and the redefining to say, I see what you're trying to do here, brain. I get it. But guess what? We're still going to go forward because we want to try.
That imagine when, I think that's going to be life-changing for me. I can tell already.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm taking that one.
Was me too.
Oh, wow. That is huge because I definitely have that anxious brain that's like, what if?
Yep.
And my husband and I joke, we play the worst case scenario game.
Yeah, yes.
When I feel crippled about something, it's like, all right, worst case scenario, go.
Yep, totally.
You start saying them.
Totally.
And then at the end, it's like, okay, most of those are pretty unlikely. Or I will just simply mitigate the situation,
Exactly.
But I love imagine when this happens,
Yes.
Keep going.
And I think my kiddo will say this too, is, Mom, I like to have plan B. And I'm like, I get it. I do understand it. But when you start to reposition it to really, truly dig into the imagine when, you start creating different neural pathways because your brain starts to look at all of those other, entities or elements or what have you, or avenues that you didn't see before. And that's a very different pathway than all of the what ifs. And so it's like, kind of like with the athletes and how they train their brain. They don't think about the what ifs. They don't think about, oh, what if I break my leg? No, it doesn't even cross their threshold of their brain. They're literally imagining 100% that finish line.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Imagine when I win the gold.
Yes. And so that's their mentality. And so it's literally training the brain and rewiring the brain for successful forward momentum thoughts and creative thoughts. Creative versus critical. That's another thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and the what ifs are basically your brain positioning yourself, constantly looking for threats.
Exactly. Yes.
So you're in that survival mode again.
Yes. Always scanning. Yes.
So then the other side then, the imagine when would be more the creative brain.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, very much so. And I love that because that is where, again, it's we're not going to push it down. We're not going to shove those narratives down, the what ifs, but we're going to acknowledge them, get curious about them. Why are they coming up? And then the next time, it's like it becomes easier and easier too, right? Because we're rewiring our brain, we're training our brain to think differently, to to optimize the creative process in our thinking and our patterns, because our behavior then will follow, right? And so as we continue to look at all of those scenarios in the imagine when scenario, that's when it becomes a lot more powerful, a lot more creative.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I think we could talk all day.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. We do have to. Yeah.
I'm like all day long.
Yes.
I'm so interested. There's also about 7 different things you said that I'm like, that's a full episode.
Right. Totally. Yes.
Okay. So if someone's tuning into this episode right now and they're carrying, something heavy, maybe grief, maybe burnout, some kind of, maybe it's like those more subtle griefs that you talked about too, that maybe you can't quite name.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
So I would say to them in the moment, sometimes the best thing to do is nothing at all, to be able to truly tap into the rest that you may need, that you didn't even think you needed. So the first thing would be prioritize rest and prioritize you above anything else, above everything else and everyone else. And then again, that's where you may need to say no more before you start saying yes. And so taking that time out for yourself to really acknowledge something's not right here. And you, whatever it is, take time off work, take anything. Ask if you have kids, ask for help. And so those are the big ones. That's the initial phase, right? Like that's where you start to realize I can't do this anymore on my own. I'm not functioning. And so there it's getting the art of receiving. I also talk about a lot. So receive that help, whatever it is.
The getting bored too.
Bored,
right?
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about that, like letting your brain
exactly.
rest so that you can let the imagination run.
It's true, because when our brain is constantly just constant noise of everything else that's going on and what you're doing, blah, 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 it's in survival. So it has no capability of creating beyond that survival state. We can't create from crisis. I often say that as well. So it's getting to that place where you are able to rest first and foremost, to take that first step. And then little by little things start coming back online.
So it's like step 1 is rest. Say yes to you so that you say no to other things, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
I really like that. And then you can get to the imagine when phase, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Where can people find you and get your book?
Yes. Well, so they definitely find me on YouTube right now. So it is Treehouse Principle. I have a website as well that I am currently revamping, and there are some other programs that are in the works. Find my book on Amazon, and I'll link that in the description. The book title is The Treehouse Principle, and it's Cracking Crisis Codes and Activating Creative Modes.
Love it. People are going to just find that their life is completely changed. And thank you so much for sharing and for taking the risk to step out I can't wait to hear more from you and continue to learn from you.
Well, thank you so much for being my official first guest and helping me
Yes.
through the interview process. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks again so much for joining me on this first initial episode. There will be more. Be sure to subscribe and like and comment below on anything that stood out to you today and what you might like to talk about in the future. Thanks again.